Mark chapter 2 verse 24 says, "And the Pharisees said to him, 'Look, why do they do what is not lawful on the Sabbath?'" This confrontation reveals the blindness and legalism of the Pharisees, who were more concerned with the outward appearance of obedience than with the heart of God's law. They accused Jesus' disciples of breaking the Sabbath by plucking heads of grain as they walked through the fields, something they deemed unlawful. The issue here is not the Sabbath itself, but the Pharisees' perversion of God's command. The Sabbath was a gift from God, intended for rest and reflection on His provision and holiness. In Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11, God commanded His people to keep the Sabbath holy, but the Pharisees had twisted this into a burdensome legal code. They added to the law, creating man-made traditions and regulations that overshadowed the true purpose of God's commandments. Jesus, the Lord of the Sabbath, responds with an illustration from 1 Samuel chapter 21, verses 1 through 6, where David ate the consecrated bread that was lawful only for priests to eat. The point was clear. Human need and mercy outweigh ceremonial regulations. The Pharisees missed the heart of God's law by focusing on external adherence to rules while ignoring compassion and the needs of the people. Jesus' rebuke is a call to understand that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Mark chapter 2, verse 27. God's law is about love, mercy, and meeting needs, not the oppressive burden the Pharisees sought to impose. In Isaiah chapter 1, verses 11 through 17, the prophet confronts a similar problem. Israel's outward religious practices were detestable to God because their hearts were far from Him. They were offering sacrifices, attending festivals, and observing Sabbaths, but their hands were filled with blood, and their hearts were full of wickedness. God desires obedience from the heart, not empty rituals. The Pharisees had fallen into the same trap, elevating ritual over the intent of the law. Jesus, in His response, highlights that He is the fulfillment of the law. He is the very essence of what the Sabbath represents. In Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30, Jesus invites the weary to come to Him for rest. The Sabbath rest points to the rest found in Christ, where the believer ceases from striving and trusts fully in the finished work of Jesus. The Pharisees, blind in their legalism, failed to recognize the one who fulfilled the law standing right before them. The heart of this confrontation in Mark chapter 2, verse 24, exposes the danger of legalism and self-righteousness. The Pharisees were so consumed with their traditions that they missed the Messiah. They were offended by the freedom and authority Jesus exercised over the Sabbath because they had hardened their hearts against the truth. How often do people today fall into the same trap, focused on outward appearances and rituals while their hearts remain far from God? In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6, Paul writes that the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. Legalism leads to spiritual death, but Christ offers life. Believers must guard against falling into a similar mindset as the Pharisees. We must examine our hearts and ensure that our obedience to God flows from love and faith, not from a desire to appear righteous before others or to earn God's favor. The righteousness that God requires cannot be attained by the works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. Galatians chapter 3, verses 10 through 14, makes it clear that the law brings a curse, but Christ has redeemed us from that curse by becoming a curse for us. Mark chapter 2, verse 24, is a powerful reminder of the sufficiency of Christ. He is the Lord of the Sabbath, and only in Him can true rest and righteousness be found. The Pharisees' rigid legalism blinded them to this truth. But for those who trust in Jesus, there is freedom, rest, and the fulfillment of all that the law points toward.